Hey guys, I can't turn on my video.
Yeah, it says the host stopped us from turning on our videos.
One sec.
Okay, this happened last time too, and I'm not sure why. Also, we're not in practice mode right now, so we are live. I don't know why Zoom has done this. Just a heads up.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning. We'll start momentarily. Apologies for the technical things.
There you are. Try your videos now.
Aha, there I am.
Why we just want you to see us.
What's that?
I said you just didn't want them to see us.
I do still have my screen sharing disabled.
One sec. I'm not sure why all the settings have been changed.
We also have two Liz's here. Is that intentional?
I put my link in the chat for people who didn't have a Zoom link. So if you signed in with my link, you signed in as me. So that's probably Jami.
I might have. My computer's not working, so I'm rushing to get it on my phone, and it's just yeah.
We're all much better at running tournaments than Zoom.
Yeah. I've never run an online tournament.
I cannot wait for my job performance to not hinge on how good I am at Zoom because it's a struggle.
All right.
Oh man, we have Europeans in the house. Excellent.
Nice.
My people.
Okay, looks like the computer's responding, so I'll join on that platform. I'll be right back, folks. I'm sorry.
It's okay, Jami. We technically still have 4 minutes until this was supposed to start. So in the chat, while we're waiting for other people to show up, why don't everyone who's here tell us what their favorite tournament they've ever attended is?
Can you guys confirm? I believe my screen share is currently showing slightly too much. It's still showing like the option toolbar at the top of the screen. Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Nice. I've heard really good things about Dev Cup.
Yeah, I love like lower to mid-tier Quidditch. Like that's a lot of what I run, because if you don't develop those lower levels, like you're not developing the sport.
All right, is my screen share now the proper amount?
Yes.
Perfect.
2018 was Madison Lacey. No, 2017 was the second League City one.
When we didn't have a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
That's the one I went to.
We love not having thunderstorms at our tournaments.
There we go.
It's okay. Emil, you'll get to a tournament eventually, and it'll be great because you're going to take all of these things you're going to learn and take it and be like, look at this great tournament that I know about and now know how to run.
See Emil saying that they've never attended an official tournament. It's going to change this year. Tournaments are definitely like the best part of Quidditch, so I highly recommend it when you do have the opportunity.
It's been just about a year since the last one I was able to go to, and I miss it so much.
Yeah. We had Atlantic Challenge almost exactly a year ago.
Yeah, it was West Regionals, and I'm like, should we be having a tournament with people from different states? It'll be fine. And then a couple weeks later, everything was gone.
Yeah, that last second West Regionals that threw off that Jeopardy question for like 4 people.
I'm so mad. I'm so mad. Never gonna live that down.
Yeah, so the World Cup 2020 was supposed to be at the St. Richmond facility. And I think the plan is still to go to that Richmond facility. I'm not on IQA or USQ decision making for that, but the Richmond fields are beautiful.
Yeah, and they were in the process, so they hadn't finished their full development project, and I don't know what the timeline is now, so don't like check me on this at all, but they were planning on creating more of a stadium type field to have one of in the complex with like permanent bleachers and whatnot. So I don't know if that was going to happen before World Cup or after, but yeah.
Oh.
I agree, Alberto. As someone who had to help break down the scaffolding we used for the cameras, it'd be great to have more permanent structures on that Richmond site.
Oh, that's where Pan Am's was, right? I really like that.
Yeah.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. That was a great venue.
Yeah.
We had more shade at MLQ Championship because
Yeah, that
we had
was-
to take notes.
Because I was live streaming, I did not roast that weekend, and that is the only reason I didn't. I was in the tent the whole time.
It was also so much hotter the Pan Am weekend than it was MLQ Championship. Like,
Well, That's the
remember
thing
in
with turf. It's dependable, but like heat just like bounces off.
The black pellets are always rough.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember entire like national teams hiding in the extra shade from that tent, like not in the tent, like just like following the shade of the tent. All right. Do we want to give people a couple more minutes? It seems like we have a good amount of viewers already. Jamie, you're all good on the technical side? I'm concerned you didn't verbally
Yeah.
confirm that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, welcome to How to Run a Tournament That Doesn't Suck, our panel on tournament directing. As we've kind of been talking about the last couple of minutes, tournaments have long been kind of the lifeblood of Quidditch. From its earliest days till now, Quidditch has mainly been played in the form of tournaments. 1v1 matches happen. They've never kind of been the main way that Quidditch has been played. Because of that, the people who organize those tournaments are some of the most vital commodities we have. And in doing so, they face extreme challenges and stress in what they do. I've dabbled in tournament planning. I'm not very good at it. It is not easy. It is easy for some of the people we have today. We're lucky to have some of the best who run some of the best tournaments to discuss what they do and how they do it. So with that all said, let's do some introductions. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and talk about kind of your experience in tournament directing. We can start with Liz.
Cool. So my name's Elizabeth Barcelos. Most Quidditch people know me as Liz, though. I started playing Quidditch in 2013, and in 2014, I got benched for our first home tournament and made the tournament director. And I've been doing it ever since. I stopped playing in 2018 because I am an old lady with bad knees, and I started freelance tournament directing. And I did that for 2 seasons, and I wish it was 3, but I hope to go back to that when the pandemic's over.
Awesome. We can just move across the screen. So Dallas, you can go next.
Yep, I'm Amanda Dallas. Most people call me Dallas. I have been TDing for over 6 years. I want to say it's 7 or 8 at this point. I've done a variety of size tournaments. I've done ones that are, series between 2 teams, and then I've done national championships in the form of MLQ. Most notably, I'm one of the co-founders and commissioners, along with Ethan, of MLQ. So I've been rather an assistant TD or TD, some sort of organizer of MLQ championship since its inception in 2015. I'm also the TD and creator of Oktoberfest Invitational, which many people in the US know and hopefully love. We would have been having our, I think, 7th tournament in 2020, but COVID happened. So we hope to come back this fall, and you should sign up.
Go ahead, Emily.
So I'm Emily. I am the events director of Major League Quidditch currently, and then I also am a US Quidditch gameplay coordinator. I have been the MLQ Championship TD for the last around 2 years. I have also been heavily involved in various Sea City Invitationals, either the Crescent City Invitational last in 2019 in New Orleans, or the Cat City Invitational in Boston before that. I also have done a lot of different series coordination, both for MLQ and for the Massachusetts Quidditch Conference. And then I ran a lot of Boston Fantasy Quidditch as well.
And we'll finish up with Jamie.
Awesome. My name is Jami LaFrance. I'm currently the people. Oh, Ethan, currently the people operations director for MLQ. But in the past, I have been pretty involved with planning some tournaments on the Canadian side. So notably, my favorite tournament is Canada Fantasy. So I've run that since its inception. I've run 2 regionals for Eastern Canada, and I've run 2 nationals for Canada, or Quidditch Canada as well.
So what I love about this panel is we kind of have a variety of people who have both really worked hard on a few tournaments and improving them year to year, and also people who have kind of taken a number of different tournaments and kind of assessed what those specific tournaments need. I think Liz and Emily have both done a lot of that, and I'd love to kind of hear their thoughts on this kind of key components when you're first looking at a tournament conceptually, kind of what you're looking for to kind of make it work. And we can start with Emily.
Yeah, so I think the very first thing, there are like a couple of key components to success. So the first 2 that I'm going to touch on are the gameplay format and the event location. So where are you having your event, and how are you having teams play each other? Because for the most part, your tournaments are for your teams. So you want to make sure you are addressing what they need. What about, and then Liz can do the next 2.
Yeah, so like I think of like the 3 V's when you're going to run a tournament: your venue, which Emily touched on, your volunteers, because you're not doing this by yourself, and finally like your vision for the tournament, because that's going to inform your marketing and that's going to inform your format. Is this just like a regular season tournament? Is this something big like Oktoberfest or Heroes versus Villains? And once you have that vision in mind, then you can do format and marketing.
Awesome. So let's kind of get into the specifics, and let's start with the gameplay format. And Emily, you were mentioning that a little bit on an overview level. Let's get back a little bit more into it. When you first sit down, you say, I need to make a format, I need to make a schedule, kind of what aspects are you looking at?
So there are typically 4 things that I want to think about. And the first thing is, what is the goal of the tournament? And that's something that's really important to think about when you're creating something that is going to be fun and engaging for the teams and people watching it. Like, is your goal to crown a championship? Or is your goal to have the most interesting games you can? Or is your goal to get people the gameplay requirements that they need to be able to compete in future events? And so when you are thinking about creating a tournament structure, think about what you are trying to accomplish for your teams. And I know we all have done the pool into a bracket, and I think there are very specific times when that's a really great format, but there's also a lot of ability to be super creative based off of the teams that you have at your tournament to make a really interesting tournament. And that kind of goes down into the second aspect, which is the number of teams. And also kind of the teams attending. So if you have, going to the number of teams, so like if you are trying to run like a 16-team tournament, you're not going to be able to do a round robin. It's just not going to happen. But if you're doing an MLQ series and you only have 2 teams there, you're like, what is the best way to get the best indication of how these 2 teams compare? So have them play a bunch of times. So I think that's something that you can always consider when you're running it. And like when you are creating your tournament, you get to decide how many teams are going to be there. Like if you want to run a tournament that's like for everyone, make it a big, but then make it a way, like have that as your like outline, like I have this many teams. And then next, think about the skill levels of attending teams. Like if you have a regional or a national championship, there might be teams of different skill levels there. So like I know one thing we've been doing with USQ is developing different ways to incorporate Swiss so that you are playing teams at similar levels, so that the games are exciting, because Quidditch is more fun when the games are close. Like we all agree. Like I know some of the coaches probably disagree with that, but to consume and watch and to participate in, it is so exciting to be a part of a game that's very, very close and engaging and you don't know what's going to happen. And then you have to think about your time per game. So how long do you need for a game to start and end? Because like you might be very optimistic and say like, I can do this in 40 minutes, but what if you have Gabe Garces on your turn on your field? Like, think about those things too. So kind of create a foundation and a format that takes all the different pieces that you're working with and puts them together into a, like what you want your tournament to accomplish.
Anybody want to add anything on the gameplay format?
Yeah, what Emily said about being ambitious on time, never be ambitious on time. The thing my tournaments are known for are running on time. And it's because I give them hour time slots. And that may sound super long, but no one complains about breaks and no one will be mad when you go to overtime, which most TDs hate and I still kind of hate. But you have that built-in buffer time. Like, don't try and cram in a million games. Be really thoughtful about the tournament you're trying to run. I get hired to run tournaments with specific requirements. Like I run NorCal by Northwest because the USQ Northwest teams are very geographically isolated. So it's hard for them to get their required games. So the format I use cross-pool play. I put all the Northwest teams in one pool. I put all the Northern California teams in one pool because they don't want to play each other. They can do that at home. They do cross-pool play. They get the games they need. And then everybody likes having a tournament winner, but I think for regionals and big things, that's important. But for your regular season, so to speak, it's less important, but people still like saying, I won this tournament. So I'm very lucky in that I watch a ton of West Coast Quidditch, and I'm pretty good at taking either the USQ rankings, and if we have a Quidditch Canada team from the West, I rank those teams, and then I just assign a point value to them. And so instead of having to do bracket, because we may not have time, and because people may not want to play a game they can play at home, you rank the teams. And this works both for cross-pool formats. And then I think everybody who's TD'd here knows there is no easy way to run a 7-team tournament that is balanced and fair. You can't do it. And I tried. And the answer I came up to for this was I would rank all the teams. And then I would ask teams, tell me what teams you want to play. If you want to win the tournament, then of course you ask for the highly ranked teams. If you, like me, came from a college team that wasn't so great, you would ask for the lower ranked teams because you want to play people at your level. So you can get some wins in, you can get some good experience. You're not going to win the tournament. So if, say, you were trying to win the tournament by picking easy games, you couldn't do that. So again, like keeping in mind, like what is this tournament for will inform your format.
So before we move on, there are a couple questions to ask for elaboration on what Swiss means. Would anybody like to take lead on that?
Yeah, so I can do this, although I know Ethan also loves Swiss because he was a very big proponent of the first Swiss national championship that happened in the US. But Swiss is basically you arrange your teams into like pods of, generally you want like multiples of 8. And within that pod, you have the first round be seeded based off of like your seedings coming into it. So depending on what your seeding is, you could be like, you'll have like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or like you can go to 16. And then you have the top play the bottom, similar as you would in like a bracket. But then you do another round, and the teams that all won their games will play teams that won their games. So after the first round, there'll be 14. We're going to do it with an 8 because I don't want to do 16. So there'll be 4 teams that have a 1-0 record and 4 teams that have an 0-1 record. Those play each, and then so those teams all play. You have like 4 and 4, and then you'll have 2 winners, 4 people who are 1-1, and then 2 that are 0 and 2, and then they'll play. And you're basically always playing a team with the same record. Yeah, we can go more into this on the Slack channel.
Yeah, it definitely makes for competitive games. But let's move on to the next tenant here. And this is going to be all about location. Emily, you kind of handle all the permitting for MLQ events. So when you're looking for locations, what are you usually looking for?
Yeah, so I think first thing is always like like what surface you're playing on. The quality of fields is so important because that is what your teams are going to be playing on. So when at all possible, you want to prioritize having really solid quality of fields because that's injury prevention, that's gameplay prevention. Like having muddy fields changes how the fields play, like how the sport happens. Having muddy fields could injure it, like having rocks. So those kinds of things are all things that you want to keep in mind, because again, our goal is to keep our athletes safe and to give them the best experience playing as possible. We also want to think about the different amenities, restrooms, water, electricity. Those are all things that, like, if you're at an event, you want to be able to use the restroom in a comfortable manner. So make sure you have that. And then think about like other additional things, like lining is so important for so many different gameplay things that you're doing. Like it makes rest jobs easier. It makes it easier for teams to see what's happening. You won't get any of those ticky-tacky calls where they aren't sure if someone's pushed over a line because the cone's moved. And then think about how easy it is for the teams who you want to be at your tournament to get there. So like in Boston, there's the tee. We tried to keep things relatively close to the tee because most of the people who are traveling in Boston are going to take that. So those are kind of the things that I like to prioritize, but I'd love to hear what other people have to say.
Yeah, I was going to ask to the rest of you, because we were talking about the Pan Am Games and the fact that there was no shade. That's something we didn't think of. And that's like the list we have on the screen right now. I mean, these are like the very important things that you think of easily. But what in your tournament directing history have you ever gotten to a tournament site, run a tournament, and then something like, oh, this is something that like I had never even considered as a potential issue before? It's okay if you don't have anything off the top of your head.
Shade is the big one, honestly. When you tour a field site is important because I hosted an MLQ series. And when I toured the field and booked it in March, it was very grassy. And then when I showed up in the summer, it was super dusty and dry and hands down the worst place I've hosted something. And so I was really embarrassed. And so like, because I tend to host a lot of tournaments in my hometown, I know most of the parks pretty well, and I did not know that one. And so now I know not to put anything there during the summer.
I think also something that's interesting that we don't encounter a whole lot, but when you are booking for these smaller, especially MLQ series or one-off events, and you're booking at parks within neighborhoods, considering where you're going to place the field and when bludgers are thrown, where they're going to go. I played in a regional tournament once where we literally had to make sure we stopped play when the bludger rolled into the street next to the field. And I personally just remember being a coach and literally begging the HR to have an AR watch specifically for that, because our players were running into the street with no consideration for if a car was coming. So that's something that, you know, I don't think people really think of, but think about where you're putting that field and where bludgers are going to roll when someone misses a beat. But again, the shade thing, that's something that people really don't think about. And, you know, even at big tournaments, you also sometimes assume that teams are going to bring tents. Make sure you tell teams to bring tents, because sometimes they won't.
Yeah. I would say definitely the amenities is the big thing. Being close to things that make it easy for teams to quickly access things that they might need without realizing, whether that's food, whether that's water, whether that's who knows what it is. But having a pretty good location and being close to amenities is the biggest thing, because I just remember being at a World Cup that was quite hot and there wasn't enough tents for anyone, and I got my first ever sunburn, so it was not a fun moment as a player.
Yeah, mine one would be if you're touring a facility, if it's kind of downhill from things, if you toured it when it was dry, anything that's kind of down a pit is going to retain water more. So if it is down a hill, then if there's rain in a couple of days, you're going to be playing in some very muddy conditions. So you've got your location, you've got your gameplay format, but obviously you can't do this alone. Tournament directing is a giant job. So what kind of volunteers are you looking for, and how are you recruiting them? And we can start with Dallas, because I know you're great at volunteer recruitment.
Oh yeah, I love volunteer recruitment. Basically, if you've met me at any point in your Quidditch career, or you've even spoken a couple words to me, I've probably tried to recruit you to volunteer for something at some juncture afterward. Sometimes you have no idea who I am and I still message you to get you to volunteer. Yeah, the biggest thing is just asking, and ask the person, you know, like don't don't assume that your email blast or your post to a regional group is going to reap you tons of volunteers. Like, people tend to say yes if you ask them directly. Send them a message on Facebook. If you don't feel comfortable reaching out to them, you think they'd be a quality volunteer, find someone in your network who knows them and just ask them to ask for you. I also think it's underrated asking people at actual events. There are some people who will never sign up in advance, ever. But on site, if you go up to them and you're like, hey, can you live stream this game for me? They're like, oh yeah, totally. I'd love to do it. CJ Jr. is one of my favorites for that. He never signs up in advance, but he's always willing to help when we're on site at the tournament. Like, there's no excuses. There's no, I don't really want to do it. He's always just like, yes, absolutely. Love to do it. So just ask people. I also think, we talk about this a lot here and there. Quidditch is very much like a volunteer driven sport, but look at your tournament budget. And I'd love to hear Liz talk about this a little bit, but look at your tournament budget and figure out where you can pay people that are normally volunteers, particularly those people that are helping you run the tournament, the assistant tournament directors, the people that are doing video. Video is so important nowadays. Teams will pay more money if it means that they're going to get footage of their tournament. So I want to throw that to Liz.
Sure. So when I budget a tournament, I determined how much does a game cost? And officials, it costs $33 if your snitch is certified in the United States. Your country may vary. And so then I just started out, well, how much am I worth? How much? I have an assistant TD who helps me now. How much is Maddie worth? And I add that to the cost per game. And that's how I figure out my tournament cost. Oh, and the medic. So for me personally, I don't put myself in as cost per game. Like, I'm cost per team. Like, this team is paying me this much. So in a sample tournament budget, I'll add $20 to each team's fee, and that's going to me because I'm doing all the planning in advance. And Maddie, my assistant tournament director, helps me live stream. So I pay her $5 for every game she live streams. It's not a lot. And I try and keep my tournament fees 200 or less. I don't think I've gone over 200. And some of that is that sometimes I just do a tournament at cost, like I do for San Jose State. But at the end of the day, if it's a $200 fee, and it's going to a full 21 roster team, each of those players is paying under $10 for a well-staffed quality tournament. And that's how you get volunteers to come back for you. Treat them well and pay them.
Mm-hmm.
Jami, when you're putting together a tournament, what kind of roles are you kind of looking for that are really important to you?
Yeah, so first thing I do when I'm building out a tournament is I build out the team that's going to plan the tournament with me first. I reach out to those qualified people, those people who I've had experience working with or I've seen previously showcase their skills and sort of thing. So I look for people like Megan Stacy in the past has been great to me, Tegan, Claire, lots of great people who have been just awesome at what they do. So I know I can trust them with certain parts of the tournament because someone said it earlier, there's no way you're doing a whole tournament on your own. I've tried and it's literally impossible because you're all of a sudden being pulled away for things that in the moment seem minor but are important to other people and you just don't have the capacity to help them in that time. So building out a good team is the first thing I do. And I give them the tools that they need to either make decisions on their own and feel confident making those decisions, as well as give them the ability to make their own team for whatever they're doing. So whether that's the gameplay team, making sure that they're confident making decisions about what the schedule should look like and that you're comfortable with the people making those decisions, whether it's someone who's responsible for the equipment and you trust them to do what they got to do. You got to build out a team that you can trust, and then you really got to like Dallas said, reach out to everyone else to fill in those roles that you need to run a smooth tournament, like officials, like people to live stream, like people to field manage or whatever that is. So I really typically like to ask, at least for where possible, that teams have a volunteer requirement. It might be, that you need to bring two head refs and a ref team or whatever it might be, because that just gives you so much flexibility when things go, when your non-playing volunteers aren't able to do as much as when they start to get tired, you can fill them in with, player teams that might be able to fill in.
Yeah. I think you guys kind of beat around this, but it's also really useful to have yes people at your tournament that if you go up to them during the tournament, they're not going to say no to you. You're one of my favorite yes people. I know I'm one of your favorite yes people, but I know you had a few thoughts on volunteers as well. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Who was that?
I was
to?
going to say that
Who's
water
that?
wasn't right.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think definitely having people and have a really good relationship is really important. To be able to just be like, I need you to just stand here and move the camera for like 20 minutes while I go do something else. And if you built up a really strong relationship with them, like they will do it. You just have to have that really strong, like, I've got you, you've got me, we've got this together. And then I also think we all, especially looking at like going forward with COVID things affecting things, we really need to start focusing on our ATs, because having a good athletic trainer to help handle like injuries and help prevent injuries is something that's really important, and is something that anyone who's running a tournament in the next year or two really needs to make sure to be having, and making sure that they're really well trained, because there are going to be a lot of additional procedures and things that we're going to have to implement to make sure that we are able to come back to Quidditch safely.
I'm going to move on from volunteers now. I just did want to throw out really quickly that a lot of people probably didn't know this, but in the early days, USQ used to create a full event team for every single regional, full like 6-7 positions. And I think it's one of the best organizational things they did, because that is what you really need to run a tournament that size. Okay, so you've got your location, you've got your format and your volunteers. Now you need to get the word about your tournament out. So Liz, what are kind of your strategies for that?
So I work in digital media, and so Canva is my best friend, and Canva makes it super easy to make really cool, fun graphics for your tournaments. I use them, like, I don't just post the tournament schedule in like Excel with that's not sexy, that's not shareable. I always make a Canva graphic with the schedule, and I make Canva graphics with the scores. And on that Canva graphic with the schedule, I also mark which games are going to be live streamed to drive people who aren't there to watch. I used to reach out to like the big local paper in San Jose, and they came to one tournament ever. And then I got smart and I'm like, no, you want to reach out to like the smaller, lower tier media. As someone who worked at a small paper, like sometimes you just got to fill inches. So if you're hosting at a college, have their college paper to come out. Reach out to like the lower, I don't want to say lower level media because I worked in it, but you know what I mean. The San Francisco Chronicle is not going to show up to an Argonauts match. And yeah, just have someone around like that on-site liaison. Yeah, like I want to be the person like, hey, come watch this tournament, but I'm TDing. Like have somebody else be your like person spreading the spirit of St. Quidditch.
Dallas, how about you?
Yeah, so everything Liz said. Also, when you are pitching to newspapers, to broadcast stations, to radio stations, etc., if you know someone who does PR like we do, thankfully, ask them. If you hear that anyone you know does PR, ask them for tips. Also, people who worked in news, like Liz, Ethan and I worked in journalism for a long time, like talk to those people too. They'll be able to tell you what to say to get people to actually read your email. But Liz touched on this earlier, right? One of the big things is your vision. You need to determine what the vision is for your tournament. If you have the experience and the time, I recommend making a marketing plan. But I know a lot of people in Quidditch like aren't quite there yet. And they're like, marketing plan, oh, that's terrifying. So we put some points on this slide and we'll post this slideshow in the channel afterwards. But you know, the first thing is really, it's about clear messaging. People need to know when your event is taking place. They need to know where it's taking place. They need to know, you know, what is the event? Who's going to be at the event? What are they signing up for as a team? What are they signing up for as a spectator? Themes are really popular in Quidditch tournaments. For national championships, I'd recommend just sticking really to like the clean MLQ championship, USQ nationals, because that's going to attract people. But for these smaller ones, like have something fun, because you don't have a lot of teams attending. You don't necessarily have a geographical theme. Sometimes you do, but have something that's captivating and people remember. Like we have Oktoberfest Invitational, and it's literally called that because it's in October. That's the only reason. And everyone knows what you're talking about when you see Oktoberfest Invitational. Crescent City Invitational, Cat City Invitational, like weird things work in Quidditch, right? And people don't look at you differently because like you're pitching Oktoberfest Invitational, right? They're going to look at that. The other thing is like use that theme to create dynamic visuals. Also post photos of the teams that are attending. Heroes versus Villains does this so well. They hype up their matches and they hype up the players attending. And then it's also the community and the teams get really excited because they're featured there. They're going to share it. You have free marketing now on Facebook. They're sending it to their friends and family are seeing it. Breakfast taco is another excellent example. But yeah, it's really just that clear messaging, dynamics, accessibility ties into that clear messaging and those visuals. Spreading the word, like we said, again, goes back to all of those. If you're posting this really cool picture of like Lindsay Morella versus Julia Bear, they're going to share it. People who really love them as athletes are going to share it. Their friends are going to share it. And now you're spreading the word for free. There's also a ton of free event websites. There's also Facebook groups local. Like I'm in an Austin moms group for MLQ because I post the MLQ Austin Outlaws matches in there, and people have come and signed up and bought tickets because they saw it there. Like join those weird groups. Hopefully you don't have to act like a parent because really they don't look for that. But join those groups, look for those groups, find those free websites, use them. And then, Liz mentioned canva.com, 100% recommend. Like it's so easy to use. And you can improve on it. You can make even cooler graphics over time, but baseline, you need no prior design experience. And then there's also card.co, CARRD.co. We ran QuidCon off of that. Super easy to make an event splash page on that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned HVI. Or HVI, which is Heroes versus Villains. I really think it is kind of the height of using even just the title of your name to create a storyline right off the bat. And yeah, with Canva, I mean, it's not just drawing people, but it's them knowing that because you did a professional marketing campaign, you're going to do a professional job with your tournament. And I think that does speak a lot to that. So we're going to kind of get into the parts of the tournament that never go smoothly now. But I just want everyone to know that if you're watching and you want to pop anything in the Q&A, we'll try to get to it before the end of the show. But if not, we'll at least throw it in the QuidCon Slack and we'll answer the questions there. But in the meantime, let's kind of talk about some of those issues because tournaments never run 100% smoothly. So let's start with kind of mistakes you've made and how you've learned from them. Does anybody want to take lead on that? Something that they've made a mistake in a tournament? Go ahead, Liz.
So I made the same mistake my first tournament as a freelance tournament director as the last one. So you'd think I'd learn, but I did not. So yeah, my first time ever running a tournament as a freelance TD was NorCal by Northwest. I do not live in the Northwest. I wish I did. And so I was really dependent on the players in the host city to help me book the venue. And so I was like, hey guys, I want to book a field in Portland. You need to help me out with this. And so I delegated to them and they came back to me and said, oh, in Portland, you can only book a field 2 weeks in advance. You can't book super early. And I'm like, that's weird, but I've only ever run tournaments in San Jose. So maybe that's right. I'm going through the process of getting the tournament USQ sanctioned, which includes insurance. And I'm talking to Mary Kimball and she's like, she sends me the actual website. She's like, no, Liz, you can only book 2 hour increments and that's it. I'm like, you can't run a tournament in 2 hours. What am I going to do? And this was on a Wednesday. And I had to know by Friday where our venue was so we could get the insurance, we could get sanctioned and get the grant we needed to bring the cost down. And so what I ended up doing is, so I live in San Jose in California. And if you do not live in the United States or even California, you probably have no idea where that is. It's a big city, but it's not a major city, which means it's easy to book fields versus in San Francisco, I could not find fields to save my life for the Argonauts. So last minute, if you need to find fields in a big city, don't look in the suburbs. And I made that mistake again at the last tournament I ran as a TD. I ran it at San Jose State. I ran it at my alma mater. And I was so used to telling the captain of the team to book the field for me. And the president's like, I booked it, I booked it, I booked it. Teams showed up Saturday morning, the field was locked and we could not get in because he did not complete the process to book the field. Luckily, because I've run many tournaments, I knew what park was nearby that we could run a guerrilla tournament. But I was just like, I should have made him send me the confirmation from Club Sports. So yeah, always confirm, never just trust. Delegating is good and important, but get confirmation because you are delegating to someone who probably knows less than you. And so they may just make a mistake or they may misread. So yeah, always confirm.
Anybody else want to add?
I would say, so one of the tournaments that I had the hardest time running was the first year Canada had its own nationals after the split. And I got some things happened where I basically only had a month to plan this nationals, which is not enough time. I was doing Eastern regionals and went really well, and then they asked me to just kind of take over because some things had happened. And so I didn't even really know where the venue was. I didn't know who the team was. I didn't know where things had been picked up. And so I just kind of said, okay, we're just going to do with what we have. And we ran into so many issues that I wouldn't say it's a mistake per se that I made, but it's a thing where you need more than a month to plan a major tournament. Don't be too ambitious with your timelines. Give yourself 3 months, 4 months, give yourself a plan of these are things that need to be done by X date for this to run smoothly. Because otherwise those benchmarks don't exist and you're rushing and things get messy. And when it's messy, it's not a good tournament. And while at the end of the day, things went, the tournament ran well, it could have, behind the scenes, things were a little chaotic and I wasn't very happy with how it went.
So those are some of the mistakes you've made. What are some of the biggest issues you've seen in other tournaments you've attended? And if you take AIM and AMI tournaments, I won't be offended, I promise. Daz, you want to take this one?
So I won't bring up the tournament that no one wants me to name. I'll let someone else do that. But I attended a tournament, I think it was at this point 2 or 3 years ago. It was hosted by a college team, and the college team had hosted tournaments for years, but this particular individual who was responsible for it, it was one of those where the college just defaulted to whoever the president was, you were stuck running the tournament. And this person was not ready for that experience. And the team was so focused on playing their game and winning that they didn't really support this person in the way that they should have. And we showed up to the tournament started late. The fields, the areas they had selected in the park for the fields were a mess. It was one of them, you had literal, we were joking that they were ponds in random parts of the field. And then another one, the mud was so thick on just one side of the hoops that it was players were getting stuck when they went to score on that side of the field, and the keeper couldn't move from side to side. And it was just very clear after the first time slot that it was an issue. And it's we don't want to step on the toes of other tournament directors, right? But it's at that point, it's presenting not only an issue with the gameplay, but it's also presenting a major safety issue. So I went up to the player who was well, he wasn't playing at the time, but I went up to the member of the team who was the TD, and I was like, hey, I played in this game on this field, and I've heard a couple of people complain about this field. You have this space over here that you could probably shift this to. I'm happy to help you. I will get my team. We will put a person at every single cone and we will walk X amount of feet over. We will make this happen as quickly as possible. That was a major issue though at a tournament that I attended and was not part of. We did fortunately correct it. He was very open to criticism. He was very happy that people wanted to help him. And like I said, again, back to the volunteers and just asking people. I literally told my team, hey, come over here. Everyone go to a cone. Just listen to this person when they tell you move X feet over. And fortunately, we were able to fix it and adjust the fields for the remainder of the day. Though, just because of the state of the park, we literally had to move these fields every other time slot, which was a total nightmare. So that goes back to everything we said earlier about look at if there's a downhill slope, look at if there's a river or a pond near the field. And if it rains, it's going to overflow. Look at the state of the grass and the mud. But yeah, that was a very large issue for a tournament that I attended and was not TDing.
Anybody else want to pitch in one of those?
I mean, it's no fault of the organizer. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jami.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
It's just quick, having the lights go out, when you're trying to finish the championship game, while exciting, is not fun. And this is another reason why I'm big on hour time slots. Is because sometimes I have to book in parks where there are no lights and I don't want to run the risk of running late. So always know when sunset is when you're running in a place where there's no lights, and make sure to pay for extra lights because you'd rather do that than have them go out.
Also get the contact info for the person that turns on the lights because they don't always turn on the lights.
And I won't name the tournament because it's infamous, but just make sure that the quality of the fields is consistent, that no one's playing on concrete, that there is reasonable transportation to arrive to this tournament, and that things just go well.
It's cool. It's not like that tournament was created by a team that 2 people here were on. So have you ever been presented with an unsolvable problem? We're probably gonna have to go a little bit rapid fire because we are getting a little tight on time. But would anyone want to take lead on this? I can throw it to Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, our unsolvable problem was definitely League City Year 1 MLQ championship, with which Ethan was very fortunate to miss out on in person. A massive thunderstorm hit in the middle of our brackets on Sunday. And when I say massive, I mean the tents were getting ripped out of the stakes and thrown across the fields. And Clay, Edgar, and I got stuck outside under a tent, hoping not to get struck by lightning because we spent so much time trying to shepherd the players into the building. And they were like, no, food truck, let me get a snack while I have to wait for an hour for this to pass over. And I have to say, in that moment, it was so bad. We were at the point where we were like, this is literally an unsolvable moment. And like, fortunately, Hank Doogie, I was like in a corner with him discussing like, is there somewhere we can contact in League City to get an indoor field? We were looking at our budget and how much we made at the event to see if we could afford the indoor field. We had a whole backup plan. We drove to Walmart, got extra cones. And it basically, in that unsolvable moment, we were like, all right, what are the solutions? Because this has to happen. It's MLQ championship, right? It's only our 2nd season. The South just joined. The West just joined. Like, this has to happen. So we, in that moment, came up with let's get creative. So we had fields lined up that were indoors that we could switch to, figured out what we could cut from the schedule. We had a ton of backup cones in case we could make new fields where there weren't mud pits. We had all the information for where games stopped and we had to do it. We put up a really terrible picture of Ethan Sturm to keep the players entertained and played some music and let them play games. And like, overall, it actually went really well. And as aware as I am now about weather, I still wouldn't say that's like, I don't know. I don't think that's the worst thing that's ever happened to me in a tournament. It was pretty bad, but it definitely wasn't the worst. And as unsolvable as it was in the moment, there's 100% a way to solve it. And I'm super grateful for the people that helped. Like, man, Clay and Edgar out there helping the poor EMT get her tent back. A+ volunteers.
I would say too, like, after a tournament, you need to debrief. You need to go over the things that went wrong and put plans in place for future tournaments to make sure it doesn't happen again. Anything you can reasonably prevent, you're putting away with problems. You can't stop weather. You can't stop certain things, but you need to debrief. You need to go over your notes and you need to put measures in place so it doesn't happen again. And you need, like Dallas said, like it's, I don't know if anyone's ever seen that Fire Festival documentary, but you need to be a yes person. Like, you need to be like, there's no roadblocks, there's just challenges. You need to get through them. And you need to at times be like, hey, like, what is the most disastrous thing that could happen? How can I work around it? I'm going to make it happen. Ja Rule isn't coming, but it's fine. So yeah, just imagine it's always going good and you will manifest that. I promise.
All right. So we're going to go really rapid fire here. So just a sentence or two on why for each of you. What was your favorite tournament that you've directed throughout your tournament directing career? I'll just go down the slope. So Liz, you can start.
Okay, yeah, NorCal by Northwest, because it is the first one I was ever hired to do, because it fulfills a need for the Northwest teams, and because I love going to Portland, and Seattle ideally would be where we have it next time. The NorCal teams get to travel, the Northwest teams get their games in, everybody's happy.
Awesome. Alice?
So it's an interesting choice. MLQ Championship in Richmond, which I co-TD'd with Emily. And the reason it was my favorite is because I actually had to do next to nothing the entire weekend, which means Emily and I did a very great job with the staff that we selected. Our staff did an excellent job. The facility was phenomenal. Again, we were really fortunate that Pan American Games was held there earlier in the summer, and we got to learn a lot from them. But it went so well that it's like, how is that not your favorite, right?
Emily?
So Mine is very closely tied, but I really loved the Crescent City Invitational that I ran with Josh Mansfield, Melanie DuPont, and Shelby Passio last December of 2019. Times are fun, because I think it was such a good group of people to work with, and it was literally just like all of my friends in one place playing the sport that I loved, and it was just like also in New Orleans, so I got beignets. So all around, great time. More Quidditch in New Orleans. More beignets, please.
All right, and Jamie?
Anyone who knows me knows I love competition. So you would think I would say like regionals or nationals I planned, but it was honestly the first Canada Fantasy because I really didn't know what I was doing. And it was hands down the most fun time. And it kind of started something fun in our little community that everyone looked forward to for the years that it happened. And I won. So yeah, winning your own tournament, never a good look, but hey.
It's true. So this is just an advice section, but I just wanted to throw over to Liz real fast, as someone who kind of does freelance tournament directing. If someone's tournament directing for the first time, what are your kind of like baseline advice for them?
I think you should start small. Every time I have screwed up or done something, it hasn't gone the way I wanted, it was because I was overambitious. I ran one year a tournament just for either very low tier college teams or unofficial teams. It was called Night Gauntlet. And it was really fun because it was low pressure because it was unofficial. And because like those teams were just happy to play people at their level. So start small. If you know a local TD who runs things, like ask to shadow them. Like I was so stoked when Maddie Forte reached out to me and they were like, hey, I don't play anymore either. You're a good TD. Like I want to work with you. So yeah, shadow someone, start small, and then you'll just gain that confidence over time.
Jamie, do you have anything to add?
I would say definitely like prepare in advance. I have binders for like all my field managers. I have like 15 copies of rosters. I have a million game sheets. I just have like so much that like might be bad for the environment, but like we are prepared and no one can say we're not prepared. So print everything, have enough to go around and to share, and have them at multiple locations so they're always accessible. You don't need to run across the venue to find something.
Awesome. Anything, Dallas or Emily, you wanted to add?
Go ahead, Em.
Oh, I was thinking, so you're good.
Oh,
Yes.
everything they said, but also something I've started doing recently is literally putting things in boxes, breaking things up in advance, right? It's annoying to have to like pull everything out of different hats and scatter it across the field. What we did, particularly in Richmond, that worked really well is we literally had a plastic box that was everything for field management for pitch 1, everything for field management for pitch 2, all of the balls for gameplay for pitch 1, all of the balls for gameplay for pitch 2. We have digital, we literally at regionals, so it was easy to move them around. We had quite literally digital media suitcases that had everything we needed to stream a pitch, and they were labeled with what pitch they were going to be. So yeah, specified boxes, 100% recommend. You can buy them super cheap at like Target or Home Depot. Usually there's sales on them, and guess what? They're waterproof.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to run into the question answering, and QuidCon actually gave us some leeway to go a little extra time, so we're not running up against it, which is nice. I'm going to take anything they're going to give me. I just wanted to really quickly, Emily already answered this one. Someone asked if you're able to play tournaments on parks. I think it might be a like Euro versus American type issue. I'm not that familiar with Euro, but like there's a lot of small like green areas, like a block by a block, that we would call a park in the US, and like those are very rentable. Like I don't think anybody's ever played a major tournament in Central Park in New York City, for example. Yeah, so it's definitely, parks are a kind of broad term in the US, I would say. The question I was really interested in, and let me just find it really quickly. Oh, did it disappear on me?
Maybe
All right. I'll just ask it myself. It was generally about field lining. So they were specifically asking how you line fields, like what products you use and whatnot. But I would say, just as a general question that you guys can kind of take whichever way you want, like when you have the option for actual lining, what do you do? When you don't have the option for actual lining, what do you do? And kind of what are the pros and cons of each? If anybody wants to take lead on this.
I am very guilty of not lining fields. I book a lot on turf. So I am still using cones. I was getting my husband to make me a field liner for this last upcoming season. So I look forward to bringing that to my tournaments. But because I book a lot of tournaments on San Jose State's football field, we can't line it. So it has to be cones. But because it's a football field, there's at least straight lines.
I have dabbled with, I don't know what they're called, but you know, at baseball that you have the dust liners. I dabbled with that. It didn't work very well. I have still not found the perfect solution, but there are venues that can do lines for you at a cost. So if you can get that from the venue, pay for it. It's a huge quality of life improvement for everyone.
Yeah, I do not recommend chalk lining because as a person who wears a white uniform, it's not great when you touch that chalk. Because it's usually pink or orange or something weird, and you just have chalk splattered across your uniform. And then it's rubbed off the field. But something we have discussed dabbling in with MLQ before is I don't know what they're called specifically, and I literally have to ask Josh Mansfield every single time. So if that's actually Josh and not Mel in the chat, it'd be great for you to weigh in. Those little flags, the little, what are they called? They're like hairs. They're like, they look like plastic hairs, and you can put them into the field. Yeah, I don't know what they're called specifically. I can never remember, but you can put those in some fields and they're like a slightly more secure version of a cone that won't totally mess up the grass. And a lot of facilities will allow you to do it. But again, it's a case by case with facilities. Like Liz touched on, a lot of turf fields, you cannot line them. But if you're working with a city specifically, usually you can get some exceptions. They have paint that'll wash off after a couple of days and they may be willing to let you do it. Richmond was great about that. They let us put paint lines on the field. Yeah, I'll send a picture to the chat.
And also think about when you are lining fields, what colors are people actually going to be able to see? And think about like with color blindness too. I know that's something at the 2019 MLQ championship, we were making sure that there was colors that you could have everyone see and like not get confused by, because you don't want a game to have it's something change, like a drastic call may be changed because they thought they were at the different boundary. So make sure to keep the color in mind.
I always try to maximize, which Liz was talking about, kind of maximize the lines that are already on the field. One of those lines should inherently be your midfield line. Like there's literally no reason it shouldn't be your midfield line if it's already there.
Yeah. There's nothing cooler than playing in a football stadium and having the midfield line be like the school logo.
Yeah. I do appreciate, by the way, since you guys were mentioning Josh saying in the comments it's a good idea to line fields by yourself, since I once grievously injured him while we were lining a field by himself. So the fact that he's still pro that is nice. Next question I want to get to, someone said, how do you decide when to delegate versus to do it yourself? I know this is something we all struggle with as people who run these types of events. I realize it's my own issue, being able to trust others to help make the tournament run smoothly versus I can only trust myself to do the best job possible because I've been failed by others in the past. Does anyone want to take lead on this?
I can go, but I might have a different perspective than these three because I'm a bit more of trusting of people that I work with. At times, I maybe give out way too much trust, and it might bite me in the butt. But it's really about picking the people you trust and being comfortable to accept that if they make a mistake, they make a mistake. You make mistakes, I make mistakes, everyone makes mistakes. So you just need to trust the person that you're doing, that they use the best judgment in the situation that they had. There's certain things that like. You're not a micromanager if you follow up to ask if they've completed a task. You're a micromanager if you like start sending them all the links and say, do it XYZ way. But don't be afraid to follow up and ask if they've met the goals or the objectives that you set out for them while you're planning the tournament. You're just doing quality assurance at that point.
For me, it's about who you delegate to. So like being locked out of the stadium, yeah, I was super pissed. But then when I came down from that, I'm like, well, Elizabeth, you're a 30-something-year-old woman, and the person you asked to do this is a freshman in college. Of course, like they didn't want, and like as an alumna of that team, like he didn't want to let me down. So of course he didn't tell me to, like, when I delegate to people who I know can handle it. And in the case of someone who maybe is new, maybe a little more handholding is required. I was just really rushed running that tournament that week. I was really busy at work. So I'm like, oh, if he said it, he said it. So it's knowing who you're delegating to, knowing who you, like, there are people you can trust. I also fall into the habit of like, it must be me. I am the only one. I am not. And there will be no other me's if I don't farm out stuff to other people, because that's how I got to where I am now. I was a field manager. I helped, and I'm here now. So you got to empower people.
Alrighty, so I'm gonna do one last question because I don't want to keep you guys too long. And this is not USQ specific, because I'm sure it applies to other countries, but I know it's something MLQ is lucky enough to not have to deal with as much. How could our community's teams wanting to host tournaments coordinate schedules methods where we don't clash with other tournaments throughout the year? I think it's something we've all run into where you try to put your state down on a date and then 2 weeks later, some other big tournament, maybe like half a region away, tries to do the same thing. So how is that something we can coordinate better, or something that you've been able to deal with in the past?
I talked to the RC. I used to be a regional coordinator, and so they know when things are happening. Even though I'm not a captain anymore, I'm still in the captain's group because sometimes they'll talk about it. You just have to be in really good communication with the teams you generally work with and nearby. Being in the West, I don't really have to worry about other regions too much. Northwest a little bit, but I'm sure maybe on the East Coast, that's not so much the case.
Yeah, I think it's also we've fallen into a positive habit out here in the Northeast Mid-Atlantic, where you have certain tournaments that you know are going to happen every single year, and they tend to happen on roughly the same weekend. Maybe there's a 1 weekend flex. And in general, we've just been really fortunate that most teams in the area respect that, you know, like Turtle Cup's going to happen that last weekend of September. Oktoberfest is going to happen the first or second weekend of October. And they'll plan around that, or they'll reach out to those of us who host those events. I'll reach out to Marilyn. I'll be like, hey, when is Turtle Cup? Just to confirm. You know, people will reach out to me. Christian's really good about reaching out to me when he's planning like the back tournaments, like when is Oktoberfest going to be? And it's, you know, it's just communicating. Scott asked that question. I knew exactly what he was talking about because I very pointedly remember the Great Lakes Midwest like begging for referees in the Northeast group for the weekend of Oktoberfest. And I was just like, this is the wrong weekend to ask this region. But it was because a ton of teams in that area were trying to host tournaments all on the same weekend. So it's like, first of all, just be aware of what's happening with other teams. Like pay attention to the Facebook events that are popping up, pay attention to the USQ website. And like Liz said, talk to the RC, talk to the other teams. Some regions I know have started having like captains and coaches Facebook groups, like post when you're going to have your tournament as soon as you know when you're going to have it. Also plan far in advance. Like I already have Oktoberfest on the calendar and it's what month is it? It's March. So plan in advance and talk to each other. Communication, super key.
Yeah. Do you just want to add, Emma?
No, I was just gonna echo the like communicate with your people who you would want to have at your event and make sure you know that they are available. And if they are not, figure out when they are and be flexible with that.
Yes, I am very lucky to have a handful of non-playing refs, and so I'll be like, hey Martin, hey DeWing, are you free this weekend? Because other teams can move their schedules around, but I need you to show up.
Yeah, I know something I've always done anytime I've been involved with a team when we're trying to do like because winter really is tough in the Northeast and you really need to coordinate well, is like open up a Facebook chat with the captains of every relevant team in the entire Northeast and Mid-Atlantic and be like, hey, let's get something down on paper. Let's figure this out together. And then nobody's trying to, you know, piecemeal things themselves. We were asked to end at 1. We have 3 minutes left. This last question came in and I really do like it. So I just want to throw it to you guys. Do you usually plan either a post-tournament party or social events connected to your tournaments? And what do you see as the pros and cons?
I'm really lame. I farm it out to someone else if they want to do it, but I am significantly older than a good chunk of the Quidditch population. So I let them handle that.
I plan that first, to be honest.
I like the dichotomy here.
Yeah, the tournament is like the thing that happens before we go out to have fun. So I definitely plan that first. And maybe not first, to be honest, but it's definitely like a thing that is a forethought in my mind that we plan a community building part of the event, because it's important that, you know, Quidditch isn't just people playing a game, it's people getting to know each other and having a good time. So it's a big important part for me, at least.
Jami just gets the tournament on the calendar and puts a name on it, then moves on to the after party planning. It goes back to the tournament.
Thanks everyone whoever plans my tournaments for me. No.
I think after parties are a great way to build community, and there's a lot of really good ways to do them in a way where people feel friendly and like feel welcome. I think the more you can have games involved, the better, because games make like people like games. So I think after parties are a good way to create a community.
I made friends with Emily playing games at an after party at Dan Hansen's house from Snow Cup. I love going to them. I just farm out the planning of them.
I really do think the social value is so high and something that we see less as the sport's gotten more, athletic and more people are, kind of shipping off right after tournaments. So I do think there's a lot of value there. I think a lot of our friendships have been made at those after parties, and it's been great to share that with you guys through the years. So that's going to do it for our panel. Just a reminder, there is the Slack channel. Any questions we can get to, we'll throw in there and answer. And if you wanted to ask us anything else, we can answer as well. I think we can probably throw this PowerPoint in there as well. I don't want to speak for whoever made the PowerPoint, but we can probably do that as well. Everybody, thank you so much for coming. To all our panelists, thank you for participating. We believe that QuidCon has a lunch break now, but we'll be coming back with panels throughout the day. And me and Dallas will be on the State of Quidditch panel to end the night this evening. We'd love to see you there. Awesome. Everybody have a great day and take care.
Bye, everyone.
See you later, everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Don't worry about it too much. Look up Beantown Brawl for that event.
Oh,
If you're really that interested. I'm gonna go, but Beantown Brawl.
I didn't say
Also,
this.
Slack Jami. Jami
Yeah.
loves talking about it. Claire Hutchison's another one. Slack her. She loves to discuss being
To be fair,
town.
I never even made it to the tournament, so I can't even talk that much about it.
All right,
Yeah.
bye.
Bye.
Guys.